Hi there. I am not sure how I admit people. Let's see. Sorry guys, I'm not quite sure. Oh, hi Brandon. Hi everyone. I am not sure how this works, so we're gonna do this together. But I have to tell you, I'm so bummed that the conversation froze, that we didn't get to see, that we didn't all get to see the Dean's panel because it was fire. It was so, so good. And so I had all of these notes of what we could talk about. But I think more important than my notes was that really we should talk about what they were saying. And so I just jotted down some quotes that I thought were really fantastic and superb. Um, and and I'm just kind of stunned still. And again, so sad that I think I missed like a third of it. So I guess I'm going to toss out some questions for us just to chew on and talk about amongst us. Um, I was really blown away when Quentin's first point about us being the door in terms of admissions, but then there's this house that you walk into. And I think it's such an important point. We are the folks who let them in a lot of ways, but they're coming into this entire culture. And also he pointed out that some students are attending schools where they have textbooks that are really, really old. And he said, like 1970s. Just want to point out some of us were born then, Quentin. But he pointed out the critical importance of sharing context with the community. And so I thought we would start there. What's our roles as professionals of how we share context in this time? How we acknowledge what we know about these schools in good ways and bad ways, and ways that are barriers for students and ways that privilege other students. So I want to toss that out there first. And I think, I'm not sure if I'm doing this right, but we'll give this a try. So I think put it into the chat. What are your ideas about how we can better share these stories on our campuses? And those might be within CBOs. What are we doing here? Thank you. Yeah. Brandon points out, if you're a good host, you walk in, you introduce them, you make sure people are comfortable. This is in the profession too. Absolutely true. I think everyone introduced themselves, right? Just want to point that out. But if not, please do. I think everyone did it earlier. But yeah, this is a profession that's very clubby. I think we, in so many ways, talk about relationships and the positive in this profession. It's all about relationships, but we don't acknowledge the ways that relationships can be really privileging and destructive in this process. So some other ideas. How are we going to clean this up? I am like clicking these buttons. I think I'm adding people, but if not, I'm really, I hope this is what I'm doing right. But yeah, let's talk about this. How are we, what can we do? Oh, I think I'm adding. Hi. I don't know. Charlene, what are some of your ideas? And hi, welcome.
Okay.
Where are you today? Hi. Oh, we gave you
I'm trying to maneuver.
Hi.
Okay. All right. So I can't see anybody else but you. That's the way it's supposed to be?
That's what I'm seeing right now as well. So I think you're in a good place.
So very unique role. I support I was a high school counselor for many years in Montgomery County, Maryland. My biggest concern is that a lot of people believe, Montgomery County is a great a school system. We get a lot of people who want Montgomery County schools, but the first generation low income kids are kind of hidden within the group of students because our council ratio is low. We have a lot of opportunities. Well, with COVID, they're slammed. And to communicate admissions people who look at Montgomery County collectively thinking, oh, it's this great county, and miss how our first generation kids are significantly impacted now, like with letters of recommendation, you know, them missing school in the spring and knowing how to advocate to get that teacher letter with them not physically seeing them. Because one thing that a lot of first generation kids are, they're momentum kids. So they will come in, they will see what everybody else is doing, and they will follow suit, but they're in their own homes. And so I basically ended up taking over for this college access program that I consult with, because it was just too much for the college people to know what to do, and being able to help. And so my role, because I have relationships, I worked with a lot of admissions people when I was a school counselor. How do I help these students, help these colleges understand, oh, this is Montgomery County, oh, you know, Montgomery County, these kids are, but there's a significant impact with COVID, like, I mean, really significant. And being able to make sure that and especially with letters of recommendation and an assumption that they can maneuver the processes, not being physically in the building. And that's, you know, how are they going to look at that? Like, you know, I see the question about the on Common App about COVID. Would there be a place to explain, or should that be like a role as a college access person? We go in as a recommender and kind of give a lens to the students in which we work with to help them understand specifically at a high school how they may be impacted more than maybe at another school, so that they can.
No, I'm totally with you.
You understand how I'm saying? Like, it is just absolutely, and only reason why I understand these things is because I was on the counselor side. And I know in a regular environment how much work we had to support our first generation kids, but now with them being disconnected, and the counselor's role in the virtual world is really assisting the admin with making sure all the students who were not going to college, you know, get their classes, about the letters of recommendation and the quality, you know, and how that will impact the students.
I want to defer to Tim to answer this, because he is, you know, they're in the thick of this, dealing with this. And hi, Carmen. But I also really want to just implore all of our college colleagues here to really pare down this process as much as you possibly can, and really strip it down to say, what must you have? What must you have this year? And letters of recommendation is such a valid point. If it requires two to, you know, complete a file, is this really the year to ask a student to chase those down, right? And make those standards, make those standards, you know, uniform, because having to explain this year, like, who you think should have more challenges or roadblocks or not, like, that's going to be super tricky. So I want to refer to Tim and other college folks. I have Shane.
Sorry.
Tim, you on? Sorry. Sorry. And I don't know how to control these things, I swear. No idea. Hey, Ashley. Someone turned sound on there effectively. Ashley, hi, thanks. And my gosh, your panel was so good. Thank you so much for that. That was really, truly amazing. And as I started here, I had all these ideas to throw out, but frankly, I tossed them all out, because everything y'all were saying was just fire and just so spot on. And so if you want to jump on in here, take this time too, because you got more to say, and more folks to be able to see say to are here. Timothy, you got it?
Thank you, Marie.
Hi, good to see you. Good to see you. So we were just kind of talking about some of the ways, just continuing the conversation really, that you all started. And one point, as we were talking, like, how are we going to ask kids to chase things down this year? And, you know, my point is, how do we simplify this process? How do colleges identify exactly what they need in those moments? And what might those points be, especially as we enter a post-testing space? Turn that over to y'all.
I mean, for some of you that are working with students, I mean, such as Carmen, hi Carmen, and others, you know, I guess we're trying to be in the space to help tell students what we're looking for, but we also don't want to overwhelm them. So I guess, you know, so what is it that your students kind of need us? I mean, we've created application workshops that they can attend online. We're trying to connect with CBOs and talk to students directly. I'm still finding that students aren't believing us when we say things are important. Like if you're working, that's important. We know that a lot of students had to step into that space because their parents could not work, especially if they, you know, their jobs, you know, were affected by COVID or something like that. So I guess we're, you know, as we go into these 2 months that are going to be, you know, literally hellish, you know, trying to figure out all what we can get done in the time we have. What is it that, you know, and TJ, I see you're there, and some others who are working with. So what is it that we as colleges absolutely need to be doing, you know, other than possibly streamlining our processes, but to get information out to students that what's important at this point?
Can you all hear me? Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I'm going to have to jump off in a little bit to prep to get ready for this next panel. But, you know, I think there has been some really great emails that I've been getting that we forward on to all of our students that are super concise, clear. Are we test optional? When is our deadline? Here's the links to see virtual things. Some very clear, simple, effective communication. One of the things that's really interesting with our College Horizon students, we work nationally with this summer was about 200 kids across the country. What we have to also remember about them is that many of them don't set up voicemails. Some of them don't have email accounts either through their school or personal, so we help them to create them. A lot of them are not on Twitter, so in our college world, we're pushing out information on social media as adults where we are, but the kids, they're texting, they're on all sorts of other type of messaging platforms that again, either you've got to tap into, or what we've been trying to do is redirect them to say, hey, students, the colleges are talking to you over here. Come find them here too. But we as CBOs try to serve as this intermediary to translate for you. I send a lot of information to the parents as well, and the parents are very responsive by email. So it is sometimes foundational to tell students, hey, you guys, you got to create a new email account right now for college work so that you can have it uncluttered, get into that. Hey, students, you might want to look into Twitter. That's a place where we push out a lot of information. So you kind of have to even remind them, set up your voicemail, seniors, this year, you know, because we're going to be calling you now a little bit more. So it's a little bit of thinking about where the students are at. I think, again, there's a lot by us as CBOs. The other thing that's really hard for I think for colleges to understand too, there's one thing to dump information and give all of the information that you want. The next step is getting a student to take the next step, the action, to take the movement, to take the step. And that's where the one-on-one counseling work is critical. It's the advising, it's the, hey, let's get on Google Meet, open up your Common App, let me see where you're at. You know, it's that type of work that has to be done with our students. And so if you have office hours or something that your interns or college students can set up where it's like, okay, log in with us and let us see where you're at so that we can have that smaller discussion group of 10 of us to talk about this. The big info sessions, they're not going to ask questions, maybe on chat. It's the smaller group setting where you're going to see movement by the students. So I would encourage colleges to consider creating spaces in these small places office hour type of things for 10 students, 15 students to then move them along.
Yeah, could I
Thank you.
jump in? Yeah, so I want to echo what you just said, Carmen. What we have found at Get to College over here in Mississippi is that we're having to just kind of slow things down, just slow them way down. Like thinking about some of the old school things, snail mail, sending out postcards, phone calls, handwritten postcards. I mean, all those things, because students and parents are at home a lot more because of COVID. Also, because there's so much information out there right now, as you already stated, students are just simply overwhelmed. And so what we did this summer, we created just a college updates session where people can come to one session and hear from every institution in the state of Mississippi. And so every institution got 5 minutes, one PowerPoint slide, give us all the high points. What do students need to do right now? It's June. What can they do now? What can they go on their student accounts and work on right now? If they're junior, what can they do? If they're senior, what can they do right now? So breaking it up into smaller pieces, I think is really, really good for those students. And if you can just, try to get with other institutions to have a unified voice, I think that really helps a lot. The other thing that I would recommend, we assist students with FAFSA and financial aid completion, and we also partner with higher education institutions all across the state of Mississippi, and they assist us with FAFSA, but they assist the students regardless of what college they're going to. So it could be a University of Mississippi representative helping a student apply to their rival school, but the students, that, and they're like, why are you helping me apply to the school that you hate, but that stands out. And so that one-on-one counseling coming from someone who's not the high school counselor but works on that college side helps. So there's a lot of hand-holding, spoon-feeding, but I think that's necessary right now because students are just overwhelmed, and we all know that. So.
I love these ideas. Is my audio working? Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. I don't get the little green dot when it says it's working, so I just have to guess. I love these ideas. What I think I'm struggling with as an institution is we would love to implement these. We just don't know how to get students there, right? So we're like, okay, so do we need to find like all of the LA schools get together and say, hey, you're interested? Like Carmen, tomorrow we would open up some office hours to have 10 student, but even when we email students or we invite students in, the students we typically see are the really privileged students who are just waiting for the email and they know that they need to click and they need to do it. So we can't even we're struggling to even get in front of students, right? And we're not even trying to talk about our institution. We're just like, hey, as people who know how this whole thing works, how can we share information to students knowing they don't have access? So ideas on how colleges can actually get in front of people and like collaborate with each other, but just to be helpful to you all, that would be, I think you can get a lot of schools who will say yes to you this year and just trying to figure out how to do it.
Can I a suggestion as someone who A, doesn't work in a college, and B, this is a big pie in the sky one, so just acknowledging that too. What about attacking this from a different direction, and instead of saying these kids need to get onto our calendar, rethinking our calendar this year? And instead maybe extending the deadline a little bit. Maybe saying, hey, we acknowledge that no one understands a whole lot of what's going on and school is upside down, and this calendar that we are all so wed to and is so important by Carmen was disrupted earlier, and maybe for the sake of students should be disrupted again. So that is a huge pie in the sky idea, and I'm going to let the professionals talk about real ideas.
So I'll chime in here. Zinnia at the National College Attainment Network. So neither at higher ed nor directly serving students, but supporting professionals like TJ at Get to College, who Get to College is an NCAN member. I think here's where we really need to push on leveraging that CBO and higher ed partnership. I mean, for the relationship-based access programs, I think they have access to students in a way that some stranger from an institution does not, Ashley. And so I think your point about, you can host the 1 hour. I mean, who are the nonprofits in your backyard, that you can offer that service to? And I guarantee you right now, our CBOs, they are crazed pivoting to virtual. They are tapped out in advisors. next year's fiscal year for nonprofits who have to fundraise money to stay alive, they're letting go of people. You know, they're paying big bucks for technology that they didn't have to or weren't planning to. And so they're going to need every human available to them to provide those kinds of supports, like FAFSA completion, not just a FAFSA night talking about financial aid. You know, they need those advisors, like TJ said. And I'm surprised you just said that, TJ, about whatever university that was, that they come in and do FAFSA with a kid who may not even be applying to their school. You know, because we were just talking about that with some other advisors who said, I would love for some of our local institutions to offer that kind of support.
I have so many thoughts about everything that's being said. Yeah, I mean, just on that topic, I totally do that. I mean, so my hook in this field, and I've worked in admissions office for 10 years, was the ability to work with first-gen students. And that really kind of got me sort of energized to do this work. And so naturally, it was really easy for me to start offering presentations to students just generally about the admissions process, what schools are asking for when they ask for certain things, just to clarify that. And I always say that up front when I'm talking to students, that I'm happy to offer that kind of support and information to them regardless of whether or not they choose to even apply to Antioch. And I put that out there for counselors and that I work with as well. Some of my best sort of communication relationships are with the organizations. Like we're partnered with Uplift in Dallas and IDEA in the Rio Grande Valley. And I work so closely with the counselors at those schools, and that's been really tremendous just for being in touch with students. I mean, they do great work. I mean, they're just like they really know their students very well. They help them set up the emails, like you mentioned. And, you know, they really guide students through the process and push them along and like, hey, you need to reach out to Shane today, that kind of thing. I can reach out and say, I'm having trouble getting in touch with this student. And, you know, I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying that to say that those seem to work so well to be in like that sort of a community and conversation with these school networks. And I know that it's not always like that. I haven't always had that sort of experience, but it's been tremendously helpful just for getting material and getting in front of students. And then stuff that we're doing this year, I mean, we have eliminated the need for the requirement for 2 recommendations. And at the end of this last cycle, we were offering interviews in place of recommendations just because a lot of our students were having trouble getting them, you know, after the outbreak. We're truly holistic in how we read our applications. I mean, we're really small, so it's hard for us to like compare to a lot of other schools. So we only have 2 counselors in our office, not including our VP for enrollment, who also reads applications. And then we have a faculty reader who does a second read. So we're like truly holistic. We really look into everything that our students talk about in their application. No minimum GPA requirement. That's, of course, have always been optional as far as I know. But we try to like really meet students where they are. You know, if they're having trouble getting things, we like work with them. Really, the only hard requirement is the transcript and the application itself. Although, you know, sometimes we have students who have trouble getting their transcript sometimes. So, yeah, I guess the holistic review is really important for us in helping students, and then building those relationships with counselors. Like I mentioned before, has been tremendous for the work.
Other thoughts, other folks want to chime in, going?
I mean, and we just started school. We're starting a hybrid model, and I guess one of the things that I think that we talked about over the summer, and I'm wondering, what will happen, and I'm wondering, for those of you working with students in this college admission process, I mean, the college admission process is stressful in and of itself, but I'm really concerned that a lot of students are bringing extra to the table this year. I mean, like, there's so much uncertainty, and it just, the 2020 hits just keep on coming. And so, I guess, what do we as, and we have the open ability to talk to other segments of our campus on how we need to be able to support students, but what are the big messages that you're hearing from your students that we need to, as colleges, be able to answer in terms of like the environment or, obviously, just big picture type of things. Yes, kids are going to be concerned about the racial environment, but I mean, are there other things that are really, really, coming across as a theme for your students that we should be able to answer?
I think some students may be totally detaching from education because in the spring, when the pandemic hit, everything was interrupted. They had this big summer break, and now they're being forced into this really weird educational situation. And so it's putting a really bad taste in their mouth. And then to think about planning to go off to another place to be in an even more uncertain situation. It's going to be expensive. I may be far away from home, and I have to focus on trying to learn and, bettering myself. And so students may be pulling away, and the conversations are just silent. Like there may be no traffic right now, because even when we reach out to students and we let them know, hey, we're here, we're a free resource, please sign up for a virtual appointment. That movement that we would normally have right now, where people are, beating down the doors trying to get in for a one-on-one appointment and work on the college timeline, set their FAFSA appointment months in advance, that's just not happening right now. So, maybe if your message was, regardless of what's going on with the pandemic, higher education is still something you need to be thinking about or planning, something like that, I think.
Thank you.
Other thoughts about this? I was just chiming in. I think one of the things that we've talked about, this anxiety, the exhaustion is real. I think exhaustion is real, just absolutely everywhere. You throw in being a person of color, my God, it's crushing. And then you put in being a student trying to figure out this process, and Lord, I mean, there's so much right now, and let's not forget the hurricane bearing down on some of us. This exhaustion is real, and this process was tough on students in the easiest non-pandemic-y of circumstances. But it's really hard on us. And so I think as we talk about like how do we get students in and remind them of these things, they're tired too. They're real tired, and it's hard to think about the future in this moment. Someone sent me a really great article the other day about that crushing sense of future look like in this moment. It's really hard for teenagers. So. Yeah,
that's something we've been thinking a lot about here at William and Mary, is like the idea of that students are just tired, and we don't know like how we can be reaching them other than Zoom, and how effective that is going to be when they just don't want to stare at a computer screen anymore. And like we understand that so much is going on, and we operate under a very similar model to like what you guys were talking about, just about like holistic review process. We have that's optional here at William and Mary. We aren't requiring any like letters of recommendation. We understand we have optional virtual interviews to add those levels of kind of personal details to the application to like make sure that we're doing this. But we don't know how to make sure that students know we're doing this. We don't want to try and force them into, like emails don't connect with them as well as they used to. We don't want to, force them to have more contact with colleges when they're feeling overwhelmed. But how do we let them know?
Yes, Shirley. You're on mute.
I've been going a lot to YouTube, and just, trying, guiding the students to whatever YouTube videos and stuff, because that seems to be a way to kind of introduce them to school, and whatever announcements or things can be done. And as clear as possible what is absolutely critical and important. They don't have an adult in their house that helps them gauge adult language. There's so much that's written for adults, but people remember these are high school students that have been guided by adults, so they can't see all the nuances in the requirement. So whatever you can do bulleted or like really specific that they need to do, they're very literal thinkers, and so that would be helpful. Another thing is just they're going through this grieving process, especially now, because they have been looking forward to senior year and they know what they're not going to get. And so they're grieving on top of trying to do this, prepare. And they never could see the future anyway. They were just propelled by the momentum of the college admissions, people coming into the school, people talking about it, and every day, when they go into their senior year. So I just think whatever, it's easy for me to send students YouTube links and that they will actually watch, as opposed to them searching for things. That's just what I'm finding. I was fortunate because the nonprofit that I work with, it's a girls empowerment program where the county actually pays for the program as opposed to them being connected with the school system. So we had access to the girls all summer. And so we're not school based in which there's a program in the school, but the college part was never in the school, like the college access to, before school started. So, but any YouTube video, anything that they can easily access without having to work too hard. Like I've been telling them to subscribe to colleges' YouTube channels, or things like that, because they're on YouTube a lot, as well as Instagram. Any videos on Instagram with directions, like very clear-cut directions, or YouTube will be helpful, I think.
I think Zinnia's point is so spot on. Students need transparency and realness about this. They need flexibility, they need dignity, and some encouragement in this, some grace I would add to that. Gosh, it's funny that, because that point reminded me of, Tamara, your incredible point during the panel, which was, students don't believe us when we say that work matters, right? Students don't believe us when we say testing is optional. And to that was we spend in the process that cause them to not believe us when we say that, right? What messages do we send specifically, directly, inadvertently, that tell them, what, test scores matter? And when you look at the landscape of how test optional is described, I wouldn't believe them either. When you see some colleges say testing is super duper important, if you have it, send it, but if not, it's okay, but it's super duper important. When you see others say it's important for some of you, but not all of you, like the messaging is so mixed, and it's a real lack of that transparency. And the question about work, this came up a couple of months ago, and I started digging a little bit, looking for colleges that gave scholarship funding for extracurriculars. And that was, I could find many of those. Looking for scholarships that rewarded work, 0. When you look at the language applications, like, we send these messages, and so I toss that out there. What other messages are we sending right now that we could eliminate as barriers, that we could acknowledge? Maybe students, to Zinnia's point, to help with the transparency.
Yeah, and I do appreciate all of the messages about simplicity. I find that sometimes my role in access and inclusion is to point out all the times where we are sending conflicting messages. Like, I mean, like you see it on our website. So like, you know, it's like, have y'all looked at this? This doesn't, first of all, too hard to find. Second of all, it's like, second of all, you know, all these bullets, these kids aren't looking through that. And you know, why use, you know, a $25 word when, you know, a $1 word will do? And it's like, you know, I say, and so, so yeah, I mean, I agree with Maria Elena. I would, yeah, I mean, I think we create, not necessarily always intentionally, I think, you know, but there's so many moving pieces sometimes in our offices, and we're not communicating well with each other. Sometimes everybody's just trying to move everybody thinking that they're moving the ship forward, but we got to spend some time coordinating the ship, the rowing. And it's like, and making sure that we're sending out the same messages every time. So I do, I mean, I you know, and I hear you. My two words are like driving words this year are transparency and accountability. Like, you know, like that, like, I think in any year, this is most important this year.
Agreed. I think we wrap up in only 4 minutes, and so other thoughts. There was so much that was so good in other conversations. So what else?
So I'm going to do a total shameless plug, given that we've got such a great higher ed audience here on the video, or just reading in on the chat. You know, I mean, I have to say, I think on behalf of our CBOs and anyone really who works in access, you know, that we have to talk about success, right, and completion. And I put a note in the chat, but really want to beat the drum on like the supports that are necessary, right, to get students to complete. You know, we can get them in the door, but it means nothing if we're not really giving them the supports that they need. When I previously was working in access, you know, I would see all the institutions saying, you know, we want more first gen and low income students and more diversity and more all the things. But then if the supports aren't there, you know, it's null and void. And so, you know, really looking at those kinds of things. And I think, you know, I'll thinking of it from your guys' perspective in admissions, that I imagine it's like, well, you're only handling admissions, but there's the cross-departmental and cross-sector conversations that need to happen, right? Where, you know, increasing working with financial aid offices, increasing working with minority serving scholarship programs, or whatever those supports are, you know, to really have a holistic approach when students arrive at your door. I'm done, my soapbox, thanks.
It's a good soapbox.
It's true. When we did the Hack the Gates paper about test optional, Dr. Dominique Baker from SMU pointed out that admissions offices are kind of saddled with doing so much. But what happens when you get there, right? It's what Quentin said. What happens when you cross through that threshold? In so many ways, our jobs, regardless of where you sit in the space of admissions, are the most outward-facing jobs in our professions, right? Because we are building relationships amongst each other, not necessarily inside. And that's, I think, so important this year, is that we have more of those conversations too, about the context that we're seeing. One more comment or anything before we wrap up? It's so good to see so many friends' faces too. Y'all.
I would just say one thing, really trying to change your process when your entire website and all of your communications is always led down a different path means that we're missing things. If you find things on what's, and you're like, y'all are acting up, you're sending out conflicting information, man, we want to hear it. Because so many times, like I've been to our website so many times, and this morning I found a new thing, and I was like, no, how did that even get there? How did the student even find that? Because you need like 3 links to get to this one thing. Like I don't even know how you got to that point. Right? So just not assuming that colleges are trying to always be as conflicting as we are, but you know, just even a quick email that says these 2 things don't match and you want to check them is super helpful. So. We're trying.
Oh, again, this year, the only phrase we should all be sharing in with each other is just grace. is grace and extension of that, because all of us are going to be dealing with a whole new everything. And so why not help each other? We have the next panel, I think. Want to describe it better than I do? Yes, we're back now. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining me. This was fantastic. Thank you. Thanks to the panelists from the previous.
Thank you.
Bye.